Good morning, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you might be doing. We wish to welcome you to the Silverlight Show, because the Silverlight shines to illuminate that which lies hidden in darkness. That is a metaphor we use not only to explain our reason for existing, our raison d'être for those who speak French, and that is to look into the dark corners not only of what people are doing, but also of the human mind. 2020 and 2021 will be a very interesting experience in human psychology. Some friends of the show are psychologists and psychiatrists, and I'm going to tell you something honestly. They are shaking in their boots, not because they don't know what's going to happen, but because they're not sure if they have enough resources to handle it. For most of this year, people have been bunked down to one sort of another. They've been in isolation, whether through government enforcement, whether through experience with their families, whether the other 10 million reasons why people might be isolated. Can't go talk to your neighbors. Your kids can't go play with the neighbors' kids. And in a certain way, this has had a lot of benefits. Families have sort of come together. Not universally, there are exceptions, but from a general perspective, families have had to get along together because they have no one else to go to. It's not like other years where you could just mosey on down to somebody else's place, enjoy a couple cold, refreshing beverages, whether your choice is a nice glass of water, a massive multicultural carbonated drink, or a cup of tea, or something a little harder. The fact is, you don't have that option this year. There have been times where it has been possible, but for most of the year, we're pretty much confined to our property. And even though the vaccines are flowing in, we'll discuss their effectiveness later, they're still months away of achieving any sort of effectiveness. Everywhere you look, the prognosis is things are going up in terms of more infections and more disease. We haven't even reached this thing's first mutation yet, and the pandemic already has us on the back foot. Psychologically speaking, this is a very difficult situation. Now, there are those, such as myself, who don't mind a little isolation. They like the fact of hearing themselves in their four walls, and their cats are quiet, and we don't have loud dogs to run around. That's just a fact of life. At the same token, I would go nuts if I didn't see somebody once in a while. And sure, most people feel the same way. Humans are designed as social creatures. We've been going mostly without our social contacts. Social clubs were pretty much on their way out. The Lions Club, the Masons, sewing circles. But people still got together. Seniors were encouraging seniors to get together and exercise, or even just to get together, because the old stereotype of the grandmother living alone and slowly going insane is simply not acceptable. Again, psychologists and psychiatrists realize this. You can't leave people on their own. And even more so, the past, I'm going to say 10, 15 years, has been very divisive. People have been arbitrarily assigning themselves up for various, let's call them clans. Let's reuse a word, and I'm going to say clans. Now, one example of a clan, although they'll hate me using that term for it, would be the BLM, the Black Lives Matter movement. I agree in principle with the Black Lives Matter movement. I do. Now, this may enrage some of you, so please, as always, give me a bit of a listen. One of the biggest problems that we have is you are guaranteed equal rights. You are guaranteed that. And I think firmly, yes, people deserve equal rights. Whoever you are, whatever you are, you deserve to have the same rights as everybody else if you are a human. People need that. They need their dignity. But what we can't guarantee is equal opportunity. Now, this message gets lost in the rhetoric. The people on the streets rioting and burning down shops don't seem to understand that. They're more interested in getting the shock message across, which is where protesting has really lost its way. In the 1960s, the hippies, as I love to call them, because that's the popular term for them, but they were free to go out and protest. Now, as a general rule, they didn't riot. They would be out there with their signs. They would block people from going into places. They'd be there with their chant, "Hell no, we won't go," and all the other obnoxious ones we've heard so many times. But their message was clear. Unfortunately, when those people got older, they became yuppies. They completely bought in wholesale to the establishment they never would have dreamed to jump into as a child. But they did have somewhere to go. Remember what I said. Equal rights does not mean equal opportunity. Right now, we got a bunch of people sitting at home, not only because of the pandemic, but because of other reasons that normally the resources would be there for, but they aren't at present. And once the shutters come off, the blinders come off, the economy is ready to go back to normal, these people have spent a year, more or less, at home doing something different. Are they ready to go back to work? Is it possible to get these people back to full members of society? It's a little debatable at the present time. It's also going to be a major cultural shock. Let's pretend on January 1st, some sort of miracle happens and everybody is going to be safe. The virus magically disappears, the pandemic is over, scientists verify it, and bam, people can go back to work. All these people who have been getting up with their kids, taking them to school, because you're not allowed to go to work, but you can take your kids to school. That makes zero sense to me. It never has, never will. But all those people are going to suddenly realize either they have to find jobs because their former jobs do not exist. They have their old jobs back, but they're going to have to take a pay cut. And believe me, this is going to happen quite a bit. They're going to have to take a pay cut because revenues have been down, but we want you to come back. This is going to be the next thing that people find out. Your job's there, but you don't get paid as much. This should bring about a class action lawsuit if it takes place, but it won't. People will just be grateful to go back to work and resume what they perceive as normal life. And the companies will stash that money away either in the owner's bank accounts or as some sort of bonus to the shareholders, saying, look what we did. Even in a down year, we were able to get you your dividends. We were not doing really well before all this, before 2020 hit. Let's just say 2020. Revenues were tough. Finding new contracts was difficult. I mean, I used to negotiate contracts. That's one of the reasons I know so much about the economy, is I've been in the middle of it. That's one of the reasons I like to share my knowledge with you. Now, in my case, I moved on from my job because I broke my hip. I'm actually not that old. It was a freak accident, but still, I spent 6 months not being able to move. That was a difficult time for me, because while I'm okay being by myself, it's very difficult not being able to move. Now I'm able to extrapolate that and see all these people that are used to getting up in the morning, going to get their cup of coffee at the establishment of their choice, going in, sitting around the water cooler. Even if you claim to hate your coworkers, you still talk to them mostly. And they have their little day at work. Their 1/3 of your day is spent at work. 8 hours at work, 8 hours of sleep, 8 hours doing other things. which is getting ready to go to work and coming home from work. Roughly, some people work more, some people work less, but 1/3 of your life has been missing for the past year. Any psychologist or sociologist will tell you there's a grieving period for that. And people have been through the first part of that grieving, which is, denial, anger, depression, bargaining, acceptance. Okay, most people have accepted the fact at this point that their old jobs are either not there or they're still holding out hope that everything will be okay. It's not. Now, the psychologists and sociologists and personal trainers and all these people that are ready to help you just don't think they have enough to be able to do it. When you think about it, 7.5 billion people in this world, and most have experienced some sort of confinement during this year, whether it be through the lockdowns, whether it be through isolation, whether they in fact had to self-isolate for the 2-week period to determine whether they had the virus or not before that testing procedure became available. You've lost 1/8 of your life, more or less, and all the social contacts that go along with it, plus the social contacts you have at home. I happen to live in a lockdown zone, and during this Christmas, they're telling people not to travel and visit other people. In my case, I'm doing okay because my relatives are all pretty much set. There's nobody who's on their own with nobody to visit them this year. But there's a lot of other people who are not in that situation. And it's going to be difficult for them. Personally, I'm not a big fan of the Christmas season. Christmas, heck yeah, get together, have their family over, to go over to their house, have your turkey, have your ham, whatever you're going to do. Yeah, it's a little bit of fun. You get to meet the family. The present exchange is always annoying, but at the same token, it's the spirit of the holiday. Now, this holiday is technically the year without a Christmas. While I'm not very religious, and I'm looking forward to not having to go out and get dressed up, grab the family, put them in the car, and show up anywhere, or gussy up your house for other people coming over, I'm still thinking, this is a bit of a letdown. Good news is I have to cook for a lot less people than I usually do. But there's a lot of people who put their whole self-worth in Christmas. It's like people who love Halloween. Those people who get dressed up in costume. I am a little bit obsessed with Halloween, personally. Love it. But Christmas, a lot of people put a lot of time and effort into that. My significant other, she likes New Year's. She puts this whole spread on. It's really fantastic to watch, but that's her tradition. And like I said, all these traditions can basically not be followed. Sure, if you're like me and you have a family at home, you're still able to give gifts and have the dinner and stuff like that. But I can name about 7 people on my block who don't have that. Their kids are grown up, they've left the house, they're doing their old things. Whatever might be happening, they don't get that little bit of holiday cheer. And that's a shame. And that's just a microcosm of what's going on in the wider world. The wider world has so many other things. They've been isolated, like I've said over and over. They've lost their jobs. They have no idea what's coming in the future. Will they find another job? Will they not? Are they going to be able to afford their house, their home, their everything that they're used to? Who knows? And with the reboot of capitalism coming up, like I said, there's only so many psychologists and sociologists, personal trainers, etc. And they don't know how they can deal with all these people who they admit have legitimate problems and need legitimate help and therapy for them to be able to get through the next little while. So, what, they ask, are they supposed to do? There's not really many psychiatrists and sociologists and psychologists and all that right now. So, what happens when they become overwhelmed. Yes, it is worse to lose physical doctors who look after you and keep you going, stuff like that. But keep in mind, well, let me ask you a question. Do you know what failure to thrive is? In the 1950s, I believe it was, a bunch of scientists took 3 groups of monkeys. The first group of monkeys, they left with their parents. The second group of monkeys, they gave a doll. And the third group of monkeys, they gave nothing. They were just there in the cage by themselves. First group of monkeys turned out pretty good. They were socializing, they were able to get along with each other, they were perfectly fine. The second group of monkeys, who just had the doll, they were mostly okay. A little bit awkward on the social scene, but at the same token, they were doing okay. Third group of monkeys died. Yeah, without somebody else, the third group of monkeys died. It's called failure to thrive. Because without social without social contact, not a social contract, that's something for a completely different episode, but without social contact, social animals like us really can't survive. You look at something like a cat, which is a very individualistic animal. They really don't do well they really don't care whether they're inside a group or not. Whereas you look at a dog, it needs that social interaction or else it becomes unstable. It becomes dangerous. People rescue dogs every day, every year, all the time, but they're never quite the same as a puppy that you get for yourself. Now, by all means, rescue a dog. By all means, go out there and help. But the same token, it's just not good to be alone for too long. As much as staunch introverts like myself will tell you that we want our alone time, it's not good for us for too long. So we compound alone time with all these other shocks to the system. And I hate to use the term PTSD, but everybody out there is suffering from at least a minor form of it at the moment. While we had the summer here in the Northern Hemisphere, it wasn't so bad. We could go out, we could garden, we could go for walks, we could do all sorts of things. But where I live, it's already snowed twice. This will be the opposite in the Southern Hemisphere, where they're just about to go into their summer. And God bless them for that. I don't particularly envy them because they get a lot more hurricanes in the Southern Hemisphere than we do in the Northern Hemisphere. But, same token, they're at least going to be able to go out and enjoy themselves a lot more than we can in the Northern Hemisphere. We're looking into a lockdown, but a physical lockdown. Instead of the government telling us to stay inside, now the snow is going to be telling us to stay inside. For most people, this is a traumatic event. But that's because they don't really know anything outside the world of their favorite TV shows. They've never considered anything beyond going to work, coming home, watching their TV shows, and going to bed. That's somewhere that myself and other introverts have the advantage. We do have other things that we can do. And I imagine if you're listening to this broadcast, you're someone who does that as well. You're probably someone who likes to think, look behind the scenes, and see what else could be the truth. And that is a very long-winded intro to the subject that I'm looking into today, which is scientists don't really seem to understand how the pandemic is spreading from one person to another. Mostly, people have worn their masks. Mostly, people have been avoiding social contact. They've been practicing social distancing. Even friends who come over, I've seen it myself. People have a birthday and little cars drive by, honk happy birthday, and then they go about their separate ways. This is a bit strange because for a birthday party, usually people come in, have a slice of cake, whatever it might be, and then go on their way. But No cake, nope, they drive by and wave in their cars. It's strange, but it's understandable. Nobody wants to be exposed. But the thing is, people are still getting infected. Numbers are still going up worldwide. And I did just a quick calculation, and it's going to be at least 4 or 5 months before there's more vaccines than new cases. I started puzzling over this because realistically, almost all viruses are spread through bodily fluids. People sneeze, people sweat, people do all sorts of things like that. That's perfectly normal. Even when you talk, a tiny bit of your saliva comes out with that. And of course, we all know those people who talk and spit all over the place, which there's always people like that everywhere. But the curious thing is, they did a report, and restaurants and gyms where people are chewing their food and grunting away in their sweat turn out to be not high percentage cases for contagion. Not as many people are catching the virus in those situations, which you would think would be hotbeds. And this fact was repeated so often that our premier, who had decided that nobody was going to be able to open a gym or a restaurant, had to relent because the scientific facts were in his face. We all know people who have had zero contact with anybody of any infection, that wear their masks religiously, that do everything they can, washing their hands, and they still get infected. And I was trying to figure out, how is it possible to do everything right, everything proper, and still get infected? Now, you have to rule out a certain percentage of people who are not doing everything right. I'm going to say 80% of the people out there are wearing their masks and doing what they're told to do. Do I agree with this? I see no harm in it. I'm not as against it as other people would have you believe. I understand people who say, this is an infringement on my rights. I have the right to determine my own body. And as a matter of fact, I have an exemption to my mask. However, I choose to use it because my father is rather sick, my mother is rather sick, and I don't want the chance of bringing anything home to them. At the same token, I respect people's choice. If someone was not wearing a mask in public anywhere, I wouldn't blink. I wouldn't say a thing to them. I'm not one of these holier-than-thou crusaders who's going to come out and say, you're dooming us all to better get a mask on or you're going to kill people. No, I don't believe that for a second. I think it should be a matter of choice. In my case, I have a personal reason to wear a mask. If you're not wearing one, God bless you. I have zero issue with you. Matter of fact, I salute you in a way because you are brave enough to take a chance during difficult times. And you're probably not stupid enough to go out if you have a cold because you're not irrational. And if you go out and you're coughing and sneezing on people, yeah, you're going to get consequences. That should be simply logical. I mean, people cough and sneeze all the time. There's something here and there. Let that go if it's a one-time thing. Same token, you should be covering your mouth. Now, where I'm leading into all this is because I've been puzzling and thinking, what are the other ways that people can get infected? One possibility is that the virus is more airborne than we believe. What that means is when somebody who's sick or infected sneezes, coughs, whatever in the air, the virus itself manages to stay airborne longer than it should be if it's just a regular virus that hits the ground. This is a function of aerodynamics on a microscopic scale. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert, but there are situations like the common cold, like regular influenza, where this can happen. It doesn't always, but it can happen. And since the current pandemic is still pretty new to everybody, they don't really know what's going on. And that's understandable, because it's so new and they don't know what's going on. They haven't figured out the physical aspect of it yet. As I was puzzling over this, a friend of mine who has a good channel here on YouTube, it's a bit cryptic, it's E4SYR, and he is really, really good. Sorry, it's E4SYB, E4SY space B. And he has some really interesting theories. I don't agree with everything he says, but that's my nature. I have an open mind to everything. I don't agree with everything he says, but I still listen to him, because you should never rule something out. Just because I've never seen an airplane in my life doesn't mean they don't exist. Just because I've never seen a Sasquatch in my life doesn't mean they don't exist either. He had an interesting video the other day, which at first I disagreed with. Then I thought about it, and I realized he had a point. And he said, well, there's no unicorns. Sorry, he said there are unicorns. I'm the one who said there's no unicorns. And in that video, he mentioned that there are rhinoceroses. There are genetic mutations. He said probably in the past 1,000 years, 5,000 years of breeding a horse, one of them could have had a lump on their head through cancer, whatever it is, so unicorns probably existed in one form or another. Point to him. I'd never thought of it that way. Another thing that he doesn't believe in is the germ theory. Now, germ theory is probably what we're mostly familiar with, for those of us that went to any sort of school, where bacteria and virus cause a disease. If you're not familiar with, I'll zip shot it really quickly. Bacteria and viruses are constantly invading the body. Your immune system turns around and fights them, producing antibodies, which is what kills them. The vaccine that's being produced for the pandemic is modeled on this very theory. If you can kill these bacteria and if you can kill these viruses, then you have no problem with the disease. Since I'm struggling to understand why regular precautions are not working, I figured it was worth it to take into account what would happen in the opposite situation. What if germ theory wasn't right? And I came back to the 1700s with Louis Pasteur. Louis Pasteur was one of the first to develop a vaccine against rabies. And he was one of the big promoters of germ theory. The fact that microbes and, the fact that bacteria and viruses are what cause disease. Then there was a gentleman named Beauchamp. Now, Pasteur and Beauchamp, both being French people, were very proud of their theories. Beauchamp, however, said that viruses and bacteria are naturally attracted to diseased areas. And it was in fact the cell that you needed to keep whole. This was interesting to me, and I thought, let's keep reading this. This is a very interesting thing. And he had the idea, he had this idea that's called terrain theory. They want the terrain of your cells, in other words, the boundaries of your cells, to be intact, because as long as they are intact, you can't get any sort of disease. But disease itself is a cellular process. Something gets in there, like cancer, and the cell has mutated or deformed, or whatever happens, and that's when disease can happen. And I was thinking, that's peculiar. Let's keep reading on this, because I don't initially agree with it, but like I said, there's a lot of things I don't agree with, but I still listen to. So I went further into this theory, And it turns out, you know what this theory recommends as treatments for the cells? This is wild. You might have never heard of this before. This is so outrageous that it has been incorporated into germ theory. Get good exercise, get good sleep, and eat whole foods. Yeah, that's it. That's what the terrain theorists have been telling us to do to keep yourself healthy. And it's interesting that doctors have zero problem subscribing completely to germ theory, which I don't discount for a second. But the same token, they pick and nibble at the spots of terrain theory that they like and try to mash them onto cellular theory. So you wind up with germ theory and terrain theory in a harmony. Yes, take these antibiotics that will completely kill everything in your system, healthy, non-healthy, whatever it might be, but also have some carrots, get out in the sunlight, and get some rest. How many times have you heard it? Clear fluids and rest. How many doctors have said? Clear fluids and rest. What am I drinking right now? Clear fluids. Did I get rest? Yes. I got my exercise? Not yet. And I looked at my friend, well, not directly, but in the internet, and I said, "You've given me something to think about." I am willing to entertain the fact that your own personal health is your first line of defense. Sounds logical. And the doctors themselves are saying that people who are healthy have a better chance of fighting off this pandemic than people who are unhealthy. The obese, the people with a pre-existing medical condition, those sort of people. And that seems logical to anybody who would listen. If you're healthier to start with, you're going to have a better chance of fighting it off. What more do we say about that? It's such a complete sentence in there that it's all encompassing. But we have to look at the doctors. I mean, they are sitting here and recommending not only that we take the we take the vaccination, we keep up an exercise program. I can tell you, I do not like exercising with a mask. Brings to life the chemical warfare drills we used to do back in the military, and it's not very fun. But it's still worth doing because I'd rather exercise with a mask on or exercise at home, where I've always had dumbbells and exercise bike and stuff like that. I also enjoy whole foods. I spent the past couple weeks eating nothing but completely non-processed food, which means everything I eat has not been touched by a factory or anything else. This is very difficult because my kids love the heck out of processed foods. They love them. My significant other, she loves them too. I can't believe some of the things they eat normally when I'm not on the Whole Foods crusade. But here I am, watching them eat all sorts of crazy stuff. And I'm sitting there with my celery juice and my little soup that I've put together of various things. And I'm quite happy and feeling full. And they're eating chocolate. Okay, I'm going to pick on chocolate for a second here because it seems only logical this time of year. You know the advent calendar, where every day you get to go through and pick a chocolate. Well, you don't get to pick the chocolate. You get to find the chocolate of the day, pick it out, and eat it. That chocolate is disgusting. I mean, it sits in there for months, and it still tastes somewhat fresh. I mean, at least Halloween candy has a decent wrapper on it, but this stuff has a plastic backboard, a cardboard overboard, and the chocolate sits there. Go get yourself some baker's chocolate, maybe not baker's chocolate, but some milk chocolate, some regular milk chocolate, and leave it out. Chances are it's not going to last very long. Microorganisms love things that are sweet. But this processed food that we are eating is killing us. And I'm saying nothing new there. I'm at the point where everything I make is something that I already ate normally, but at the same token, I've gotten all the bad stuff out. The biggest thing I've noticed, my blood pressure has come down. Well, probably not today, because I had a little bit much salt last night, but at the same token, for most days, my blood pressure has come down. It was close to the danger zone before, but after a couple weeks of not eating salt, it's come down remarkably. So right there, just because I'm not following the terrain theory, doesn't mean I'm not benefiting from it. And my juicer is working overtime. Now I'm doing this because even though I'm not in one of the vulnerable categories, I don't want to be in the category of people that can pass it on. And if you don't show symptoms right away, you're infected long before you ever have a chance to go out and spread it. That was wrong. You're infected and you start spreading it long before you feel any of the disease. That's true for the common cold. That's true for influenza. You're passing it around before you get symptoms. So these people who are going out and getting tested, congratulations, but you're already too late. Or too early, depending. I mean, if you just were exposed today with somebody with the virus, then you're not going to be getting any result if you go for that test. It has to be a perfect couple days after you have it and a couple days before you feel it. The testing has major issues, as we know, and this whole pandemic has cast a dark cloud above the human race. We have an invisible enemy which we don't know about, and we're not even all unified to fight. I find this interesting because in 1986-87, I believe, Ronald Reagan said if only we had alien invaders coming down, then all humanity would unite itself to stand against them. And this pandemic has showed, unfortunately, that he was wrong. Humanity won't unify. There's always going to be those pockets of people who say, nope, this is not real. Nope, this doesn't affect me. Nope, I sympathize with the invaders. Nope, whatever it is, I'm not going along with the rest of the human group. And they have their own reasons for doing this. Like I said, I respect people who are not wearing their masks. That is their legitimate choice. But it shows we can't unify against something that affects everybody no matter what. And as soon as the economic restrictions are lifted, we're all going to become less unified than we are right now. People are almost ready to revolt, and if we were allowed outside our houses, it might happen. But right now, the only thing we can do is go on the internet and complain about it. I wonder how they did it 100 years ago during the 1918 to 1920 Spanish flu. They didn't have the internet. They had books. And not all families had books, because books were a luxury. Not everybody knew how to read. As a matter of fact, a small proportion knew how to read. So they would have had to play games together, socialize together, and do everything that we're doing now, except without the luxuries of the internet, without podcasts like this one, and any of the video games that you might be willing to play. The 1920s were also a more radical time. Socialism had gained its first foothold in the USSR. And there were a lot of revolutionary groups going around. BLM is not revolutionary. They're evolutionary. Revolutionary means let's overthrow the government and do away with everything. And BLM really is not revolutionary. They want things to change, but they're not here to overthrow the government. They just want a better spread of resources, which is admirable. The people who go out and riot and break stuff and smash stores in, those are not BLM people. Now, keep in mind, BLM has set themselves up so that they can distance themselves from people like that. BLM has a structure that's very similar to that of terrorists. Now, I'm not saying they are terrorists, I'm saying they've structured themselves like that, where they have a head office that gets donations from their branch offices, and their branch offices are set up so that at any time, the head BLM office can disavow themselves of their activities. Also, all that funding goes to the central BLM office, which is set up by the same 5 people who have done very well for themselves. Once again, the leadership is suspect. I have no problem with somebody who wants to protest civil rights, because every group wants to feel victimized right now. If you're white, you want to feel victimized because Black Lives Matter is pointing the finger at you. If you're black, you feel you haven't been given equal opportunities, and you're probably right. I will agree with you. You haven't been given equal opportunity. The same token, there's no opportunities out there. So it's hard to give you what doesn't exist for anybody. If you're Chinese, you certainly have a background that has included very severe oppression over several centuries. Asians in general put up with white rule, and yeah, you would have a grievance, but at the same token, you would have to understand. Direct your anger. The people who are around today are not causing your oppression, mostly. Again, there's always a couple in every group. But nobody's really causing your oppression today. And no one's getting special opportunities. There's no such thing as privilege. There's no such thing as a racial structure. People can rise based off their own efforts. People can become anything they want to be. We had Barack Obama in office. We're going to have Kamala Harris as vice president. And, if I'm right, we're going to have a female president in just a couple months, because there's been another round of lawsuits that have been launched by Mr. Trump, by Texas, and some other people. So, because of that, the election will be held in abeyance, and the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, will step into the president's position. We live in a very interesting time, and the important thing is to remember we're all in it together. Black, white, Asian, yellow, purple, don't care what your race is. This is a time we need to come together. Not only because of the pandemic, but because of what happens after the pandemic. Elon Musk has already taken off for Mars. He wants to move 1 million people there. And he says the first mission will be in 2026 or 2024 if things go right. So he's already off going to Mars with 1 million of his closest friends and family. Maybe that's an opportunity you'd like. I don't know. He's a bit of a libertarian, and while I respect libertarians, I don't think they quite understand how things work. That's a personal opinion. But Mr. Musk has used his education and his opportunities to open up a whole new frontier, that of living on Mars. He has done this, admittedly. He started off from a family that was pretty well off. He got lucky in what he invested in. But he's taking a big chance in moving people to another planet. That's a huge opportunity for people that go and get lucky there, but there's going to be people that, like the Wild West, some people got lucky and found gold, and other people found nothing and wound up having to trade for a shot of whiskey and a meal. The fact is, Elon Musk looked around and said, there's not enough opportunities on this planet. So I got to go out and find my own planet. So who are we? We who do not have billions of dollars at our disposal and a space program. We who the retail establishments are going to start going under left, right, and center. The Bay, Walmart, all these places are going to start closing outlet centers because they're going to say after this Christmas, oh, we had a slow holiday season, which means we got to cut back. So for all those people out there who are looking to go back to their jobs and looking to serve other people, bad news. Your jobs aren't going to be there. We're going to need massive help, not just from psychiatrists and psychologists, but also from job hunters, and from the, I don't know what they're called in your area, but job outreach programs in general. We have a couple that are run very well here through the colleges. But the same token, I've never been happy with them because they're kind of wishy-washy when it comes to things. I have a very good skill set, and I've gone to them saying, I do not want to be doing what I am doing now. Please recommend a career field for me that I can get into. And they say, what do you want to be? I said, here's my skill set. What are my options? And they say, well, what do you want to be? No. I've already got this big skill set. If I have to take a course, I'm willing to. But tell me, what should I aim towards? And they just sit back, what do you want to be? So it's frustrating for me, but I look around and I see advertisements for driving a truck or, learning a trade, which are both very valid options. And learning a trade might not be your worst option at the present time because when the economy goes down, the government invests in infrastructure. So being a pipe fitter, welder, whatever it might be, that might be a good option. But another good option to explore would be what to do with this empty retail space that's there already and it's going to get worse. I noticed casually out of the corner of my eye that there's a new restaurant opening that's planning to be a chain. At first I was thinking, what a strange time to open a new restaurant during the middle of a lockdown. But then I thought about it, and this is really a good acid test. Whatever you're trying to market, all of your products are going to be off of orders, like people who order in for takeout. So if you can make a go of that, you're going to be insanely profitable when people start sitting down in your dining room. It's kind of the opposite of Gordon Ramsay's model, where he wants to turn the dining room over twice during a day, which is actually the proper model to follow. But if you're building up a successful base now of people who are going to order out, that means you don't have to have the dining staff on standby. You don't have to have anybody there. The only thing you have to do is have the food ready, and the people will come and pick it up themselves. No seats, no service. Whether you have shoes or not, you're still getting your food. So when you start allowing people to sit, they're going to find it enjoyable. Interesting idea, I thought. It's a way to use this to your advantage. The people who own this restaurant have made an opportunity for themselves. In the near future, once we get out of this pandemic situation, and once we find out what the new normal is, we're going to have a very, very different world to wake up to. For those of you who spent your time at home, learning new skills, learning new trades, learning essentially, you've done a good job for yourself. Hopefully you picked a good field, because things like urban planner or urban architecture might not be very easy to get into since there's so few jobs. But nurses, practical nurses, and what do they call those people who go in and look after personal service workers? That's what I'm looking for. They're probably going to do relatively well. I'm not going to say their salary is going to go up, but they're at least going to have the opportunities. The same token, not everybody really has the skill set to be a PSW. It's a hard job. Not everybody can be a nurse. It's a hard job. And not everybody can be a doctor. It's a hard job. Sure, you can find that perfect doctor's position where you sit back and somebody comes in, you give them some aspirin, they go away. Yeah, those do exist. But as a doctor, as a nurse, as a PSW, you deal with a lot of death. And that also, unless you're a complete sociopath, that's going to affect you. Every death affects another person. But that's the important thing of why you can't give up right now. If you give up, whatever you give up is going to affect somebody else. No matter how alone you think you are, there's somebody out there who does care for you. If for no other reason than you being you. And that's what a psychiatrist or a psychologist is going to tell you. This radio show is not a substitute for a psychiatric or sociological help. But at the same token, it is absolutely a way to say to you, someone cares about you. I care about you, and I'm sure there's more people than just me. Use this time for healing. Sure, you can't go out and clasp hands with your friends and go out and toss the football around. But you know what? You can do some serious introspection. You might be alone this holiday season, which would be terrible, but at the same token, use that time. Meditate to yourself. Don't just sit in the corner with a couple glasses of wine and think, poor me. As tempting as that is. But use it to count your blessings. Do you have a roof over your head? Do you have warmth? Or do you have air conditioning, depending on where you live? Do you have food? No matter how poor it might be, do you have it? Because if you have shelter, relative comfort, and food, and clean water, let's not forget clean water, you're already doing better than a lot of the population on the planet. 4 little things that we take for granted that have all kept going through this pandemic. So, like I said, 4 little things that you can say you're living better than about 3/4 of the planet. Not much to think of, but I can sit here, drink this cup of water, and not think anything of it. While probably not my immediate listening public, but out there for sure, there are a lot of people that's as much water as they get in a day. Clean water anyway. We have so much to be thankful for. And through the recent Thanksgiving holiday and the upcoming Christmas season, that's one of the things you're supposed to remember, is your blessings. Count the blessings you have. This has been a difficult year, but there have been more difficult years. And there will be other difficult years. Not just for you personally, but for the world. But we can get through this. We can survive, we can get better, and we can look out for each other. And that's the one thing that we've forgotten in the modern world. We need to look after each other. Yes, it's important to recognize our individual rights, but we should also remember each other. Making sure you are treated fairly does not mean making sure that your opponent is treated less fairly. You want a fair game, and in return, you want a fair life. For those of you who've listened in on the Life Online Radio Network, as always, we welcome you for this episode. For those of you who listen in on YouTube, as always, appreciate the listen. For those of you who want to support the channel, a link in the description to our books. And remember, every one you purchase goes directly to fund the channel. We make no money from this, and we never will probably. This is only information, and as we have always said on the Silverlight Show, information should always be free. Once again, thank you for listening. And wherever you are, we hope you have a good day.